We engage in authentic conversations about our weekly entrepreneurial goals while exploring business, failures, success, and personal growth.
We're going to continue to work and get better at this, so thanks for tuning in.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Our vision will highlight a diversity of guests who are creatives, industry leaders, and individuals creating positive change within our communities. Join us on the Our Vision podcast.
Our shared journey to become better humans.
It's not only our vision, but it's your vision too.
FSU.
Hello, good sir.
Hello.
So we're going to get into something that Joe is constantly telling me. And he's always saying, stop comparing yourself to others.
Yep. Why do I tell you that?
I don't know. Because I don't do it that often.
No?
Why do you say that to me?
I think sometimes it limits our ability to see us for who we are.
Yeah, but why would you say that to me?
Usually say it to you when you're struggling.
But why would that mean that I was comparing myself to
I think there are times
others?
where you compare yourself where you wish you were a better speaker or a different skill set, or if you think you can do something
so I'm
to the level of what somebody else might do. Sometimes I think that sinks in on everybody, not just you.
I'm comparing myself to you then.
Maybe. Sometimes.
Your admirable speaking abilities.
Well, it could be one way, but yeah. I think everybody does that. I think we all do it. But I think sometimes that can lead to resentment. I was trying to think of a time earlier when I was resentful of somebody. Have you ever worked at a place and you look at this guy or woman and they're in charge and you're thinking, how did they ever get in charge?
Oh, yes.
So you're kind of comparing. You're like, well, I'm doing the job. Like, I'm good with people. Like, why is that person in charge? Could be who knows? Could be education. Could be the right place, right time. Could be that they're really good at hiding their deficiencies as far as how they treat people. But definitely I felt resentment towards people that I've worked under that you're like, wow, this woman is not a leader, and they're in a leadership role within a company, and it might be their education, even though their education or degree has nothing to do with what is happening at the job. So comparing, So I think we all go through that. And I say it just out of care to people sometimes. It's like, I don't want to compare myself to somebody in a way that leads to resentment or takes my eye off of what I'm trying to do.
Do you ever catch yourself comparing yourself to others?
Yeah, I think
in a negative way.
How do you?
Because there can be negative and positives with that.
Yes.
I would say a negative would be when you feel like you don't have the abilities of someone else, so you put yourself down for it in your own head, kind of like that negative self-talk. And then the positives would be like you admire someone, and how would you want to learn from them and get better at your skills? And
I can think of another one, is when you're comparing yourself as being better than somebody else. That can be a dangerous one too. I think we all go through different points in our life where we may do that. But yeah, so like if I see somebody that I kind of attribute it to kind of like being a musician. So you see somebody that can play guitar really well, and you're a good guitarist, and everybody around you is kind of equal to you or less than. So you're going to look to somebody else that might have better skills, right? And so you might want to play with them. Same is true with what we're doing here lately over the last several years. Like, you keep looking for people that are doing better than you. And I think we're more focused on that this year than we've ever been. Looking to compare in a healthy way. Like, who's doing something that we want to be able to do and learning from them.
Yeah.
So I think you can do it both ways. But I've also seen it where I look at like somebody doing video production, or I see somebody doing photography or content creation or marketing, or coming up with a viral way of connecting with people or their target audience. And I'm like, man, how did they think of that? How did they do that? And sometimes I feel a little down on myself as far as my abilities. So I don't want to stay in that space too long, because I think then you're just, all of a sudden you may give up, or you may not decide to do something that day that could help you improve that. So that got me thinking about that today too, when we're having a phone conversation with a friend for accountability. We're going to be joining an accountability group to talk about like what our personal goals are, not just business goals, right? And he was sharing some tutorials that he was going to do. I'm trying to think of which for color grading. And so when he said that, I'm like, yeah, that's something I'm interested in. Then he brought that up and I'm like, wow, I want to do that too, maybe. So he said there was like 20 courses that were free that you can download. And I'm like, I might want to do that. So comparing yourself, right? To me, that's a healthy way of comparing.
Everyone's on a different level too. So you may be comparing yourself to someone that has put in the time and has gained more skills and knowledge. So that's why you shouldn't hold yourself to too high of a pedestal compared to other people, because there are going to be people that are more advanced than you, but they most likely put in the time to get there, and they probably failed many times over in the beginning. So I would say that's another reason why you shouldn't compare yourself too much to other people and allow that to get you down.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think when you're looking at an individual, you might only be looking at one aspect of that. So they might be really good here at color, let's say color correction or color grading, right? And you're looking at, I'm talking about a skill set specifically to video production, or you might just be looking at that. They might not be good at communication. They might not be good at planning out and storyboarding. They might not be, so there might be some other skill sets there that you have no clue that they're struggling with, and they're trying to sharpen their skills there too. So a lot of times we're only highlighting, especially in business, like what we're good at. Wouldn't you agree? So, be careful of how you compare. Like
different levels of that too.
There you go.
Just like you're saying. So, okay, let's take it to color grading. So you want to get better at color grading. There may be somebody that put way more time in than you did at color grading.
Right.
And so that's one example.
And what is color grading? So because some people might be listening to us that don't really understand that color grading is.
So it's a post-production skill in film production or video production. So you can take like log files, ProRes, RAW files, and achieve a specific look that you want for your video or film.
Right. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I just wanted to bring people up to speed on that a little bit. So
that's an entire thing we could go into in deep depth. So.
But more importantly, we're looking at skills of other people when we're comparing sometimes. So that can be anything, right, Brad?
But you said something too where there's different levels of it. So that one example is one facet of comparing yourself.
Right.
Okay, another example of that would be, so like you were saying, we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. And to kind of give an example of that too, like Joe and I have, like Joe has strengths that I don't have, like communicating.
Right.
I have strengths that you've told me about with like details and
right. Thinking things through to a different level sometimes where I'm, just moving too quickly.
That you appreciate about me.
Yeah.
So you may look at somebody on a higher level than you, but they might not be as skilled as you are in another area.
Right.
And you would have no idea because a lot of the people that we compare ourselves to, we don't even personally know them. So we're getting like a little sliver of who they really are.
Right. And that really comes down to building a better self-confidence in yourself, right? You're always going to feel those things, right? When you're doing projects or moving forward. And the other thing is like you look at somebody, especially body image. We just did a project where it was really talking about body image, defining yourself outside of your body image, right? So even for a male or female, we look at other people and we're like, oh man, they're so like, they're completely, in shape. They're eating great. And we can compare ourselves to that. We can feel really down on ourselves, right? Right. But we have to ask ourselves, what did they put in place to do that, right? So we'd have to change our lifestyle. And that's really the question you should be asking yourself. When you start comparing yourself too long and you start feeling bad about yourself, you're saying you're having your self-talk is the wrong self-talk at that point. Now you're just destroying yourself, right? So you got to back out of that and you got to ask yourself, what do I need to maybe accomplish what they're accomplishing? If it's really what they're accomplishing, I don't know. Like you said, we only see a sliver of it, so we really don't know. Is this a one-time project that we're seeing that they did, or is this something consistently they're doing? So that's the thing, is like, what's the question then? The question is, what do I have to do to accomplish something equal to that, right? And that might be develop a new skill, like we're talking about, right? So an example of that for me would be lately this winter, I feel like my body isn't the same. I don't feel as strong. So we talked about personal goal. Like I went up to start doing more yoga, and I'm getting ready to bring the bike over here and get it, and start doing more biking outdoors and going for more walks and things like that. So I have to shift what I'm doing. Right. So I can look at somebody else that's in shape. What am I doing? I'm sitting at the house 90% of the time. How can I expect to be in better shape if I'm not doing something to correct that? So it's not always just fair to compare yourself, right, bro? Do you think, like you have to make different choices too?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just wishing to be different, or wishing to have that skill, or wishing that to happen. And I know you say that too. You've said it on some of our notes and stuff, is like everybody has something to bring to the table. So I don't know if you have any examples of that, but I can think of, like, we were talking to a friend of ours today, and I really admire sometimes his ability to write. And I'm not a great writer. So I see one of those skill sets that he has that he could bring to a project if we ever needed it, where I don't have that. I'm not a great writer, so everybody's got an ability to bring. Or I could look at that as like, oh, God damn, he's so good at writing and I suck and I'm never going to get better at it. Or I can put myself in a room with him and start to figure out what his process is to write and start to emulate that, right? So you can either be jealous of people, resentful, or choose to change your habits a little bit, develop the skill.
I think we're in an era where of social media, where you see people doing all these extravagant things, or you see people that look happy all the time, or
they're using filters, or right.
Yeah.
You're right. They look happy all the time. You're absolutely right, Brad. They look happy all the time. Everything's fine. It doesn't show any of the struggle, many times, right? And I think that's one of the things with this podcast is we want to talk about not only the good stuff, but like we're talking about today is comparing. We all go through that, right?
A lot of people want to compare themselves to, the latest and greatest influencer,
right,
whatever you want to call these people. I hate that word, by the way. And we're just seeing a skewed perspective of those people.
I think a lot of times.
And a lot of people aren't even being true to themselves.
Yeah, I can't even.
With what you're seeing on social media.
I can't even imagine like what my grandkids are seeing right now.
So
like comparative.
Trying to hold themselves up to whatever it is that they're seeing, when it's probably not even the reality of it,
Yeah, and then you even have like you got all the filters on there. People aren't. You're talking about beauty. You're also talking about there's people that actually go and take their picture near a car. There's people running airplanes out, private airplanes to do shoots on, and they're not even flying off the tarmac. So here you are watching somebody present themselves that way, and you're thinking, oh my God, they got a private jet. They don't have anything. They spent $800 to sit in the jet, or $1,000 or whatever it cost, right? Yeah. That's a totally different way of. So now we have people. If you're not healthy and you can't be solid in yourself, you're comparing yourself to something that's completely unattainable for the most part, right? Not that I don't believe you can have a private jet, but the majority of people do not have a private jet,
right? Okay,
and to do that, you have to put a lot of work in to be able to afford something like that for the most part. Unless you're a trust fund baby or you come from a, multi-generational wealth and that kind of thing. But yeah, that's an unattainable to look like I don't want my kids looking at that stuff and thinking that's life, right?
Yeah.
So choosing who you compare yourself with, right? Are they really putting the work in? Do I want to use social media as a gauge of what I want to do for myself? I don't think so. I think that's silly, don't you?
Yeah.
Like,
I'd rather seek out individuals that are doing something at a high level. So for me, I'm looking at people that are good at film production, or like you and I are looking for people that are good at like real estate investing and that have a lot of knowledge and experience in that. And I try to learn from those people rather than saying, I'll never get to that level. I seek those people out so I can.
And I think that's a healthy way, right? Don't you think, comparing like that? Like, we're seeking out those people, right, Brad? Is that what you're saying? Like, seeking out people that are actually doing the work.
Yep.
That's a healthy way of comparing. So you realize that you're not there, but they have a skill set or they've done it, and you want to learn what that skill set is, what they had to develop to do it, or the process they did that with. And to me, that's a more reasonable way of living. And if it doesn't take much to seek that out. I don't think. I think you should be able to see that logically, right? I don't need to go to TikTok to find out to get my information. I guess is my point.
Do you ever did I bring this up? Do you ever struggle with comparing yourself to other people? And we already
but I think over the years I've gotten better at it. Yeah, I have struggled. And that's why I tell people, that's why I say it to you as a friend. I mean, let's not compare ourselves, but let's try to find a healthier way. Not that you're doing that all the time. I'm just saying I say it because I think it's an important part of what we do. You know, if we're trying to get better at something, we can't sit around and go, oh, I'm never going to be able to do it, or I'm comparing myself, and we're knocking ourselves down mentally. Like, that's silly. It's not silly. I mean, it feels real at the time. I mean, but we can train our brains to think differently, I think. And I have in life, you know what I mean? I'm not comparing myself to people as much as I used to.
Right, me either.
I mean, that's something.
When I do, those thoughts come up in my head, but I'm much quicker to block those thought patterns out.
Right.
And you're right. Like, there's times where I struggle on this podcast.
Right.
And I beat myself up over it, and you step in and you're like, Brad, you need to stop comparing yourself to others. And there's some other situations why you had said that.
Right.
Because if I have a hard time, I have a lot of mental blocks and trying to think through in a linear way on the podcast.
Right.
That's just another example for me.
So we worked on format. We worked on deciding whether or not, and it's gotten better. I mean, when we decide whether or not we can edit that out a little bit, if we had to delay or stop and then restart, that's fine, right? We're in charge of this. It's not like we're trying to not be authentic if we edit something out, but you're going to take mistakes out. That at least we do, and that's what we're doing. You know what I mean? So we found workarounds right now that we're using, so that we're not so hard on ourselves. We know we can correct that, right? Because we look at other product, like when we compare and look at other people, and we do that as humans. We're looking at other people that are doing this, right? And we say, oh, we want ours to sound like that, or look like that, or the format a little bit, right? And so that, to me, that's a healthy way of comparing, right? To create a good product. Trying to see here. Let me look and see what else I have on my notes here real quick. So we talked a little bit about developing a skill, right? And you just brought that up. One of the skills, and it was like an epiphany today, is you want to get better at communication. I'm like, holy shit, what good insight, right? Because that's one of the most important skills I think you can have. Whether you're in business, whether you're working for somebody, whether you're married to somebody, whether you're raising your kids, whether you're whatever you can think of. If you can be a better communicator, that kind of encompasses a lot of areas that can really help you and springboard you forward, right? If you can't advocate for yourself and you can't communicate, you can't let people understand that you're there and, and communicate in a way, where are you going to go, right? So I'm thinking to myself today, I'm like, wow, all right, so I'm gotten pretty good at communication over the years, I think, right? What can I think of, like, to accomplish? And I couldn't think of anything. So now I'm comparing myself to you, right? In a healthy way. I'm thinking, wow, I wish I had some insight like you just had about communication over the last recently, right? And I'm like, man, I can't think of anything, Brett, so I'm going to have to sit down and think about, like, what do I want to develop personally that would be a good skill that would help me just generally in life, not just in business.
What's an area you'd look to get better at?
And that's what I don't know. Today I was thinking about that. I'm like, man, and not that I don't need to get better at something. I just don't know what should be a focus at this point, to be honest with you. I think about managing emotion, when you compare other people, like there's some people that don't do so good at, like when they get upset. I'm usually pretty good, right? But if I get upset, you've only seen it a handful of times over 11 years. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of I don't think I need to work on that. I think I've gotten better at that. So I don't know. I'll have to think about it, to be honest with you. But that, you picking communication and struggling at it and being willing to work at it, like I think that's a great thing. Like I can't think of a better thing for you to work on. And it's going to take time. And I think I've already seen some changes since we started this podcast with you, is that you're willing to do it and you want to do it and you're not giving up on it. And that's the part people don't see, right? So if you hear an edited version, you might not know the struggle we're going through, right? So basically social media, if I'm hearing you correctly, and I agree with you, that's an edited version of life, comparing yourself to people for a segment, not really wise.
I wanted to bring that up because I think a lot of people compare themselves to others on social media in today's time.
Yeah, a lot of people,
especially with younger generations.
Well, and I think the adults too. I think there's some stats saying like 45 to 50 or 55 are spending like I don't know how much on it, right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing that has gotten better for me, Brad, is that my usage has gone way down. I'm reading, you've seen what I did most of the time yesterday was read about Airbnb, right? I wasn't spending time on social media all day long. I spent hours and hours and hours reading and listening and doing that kind of thing. So if people are spending a great deal of time on social media, they are comparing themselves to whatever they're looking into, right? Those people, groups or whatever, right?
And this is a great medium for us when it comes to that, because we can get better at this, and at the same time we're not hiding too much of our flaws.
No, we're
not hiding anything. We're trying to be authentic, true to who we are. We're not presenting we're not presenting
a hyped version of self.
Well, we're not presenting false identities on this podcast. Right. Does that make sense?
No, it does. Yeah.
Am I using the right word? False identities?
Well, I don't know. I would say like
characters.
We're not trying to be something.
We're not being fake.
We're not trying to
being real.
Yes, right.
As real as we can be.
Right.
It can be an uncomfortable situation because this is only episode 18. So we're still at the early stages of this and trying to get comfortable with it.
Yeah, it's not
to get to the point where we don't realize there's a camera there. We don't realize we have a light up here. There's not, where that stuff just becomes invisible.
Right. Well,
and I think it will the more we do this.
Also, you and I's personality, like kidding around and stuff like that, like we're still trying to find our way. Right. But yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to be authentic as we can be. Right. So we talked a little bit about the skill, like developing skills, comparing yourself. What was some of the other things you thought maybe?
So it's another reason why we use the phrase keep moving forward. Because when you start comparing yourself and saying like, I suck at this, I suck at that, this person's way better than me, you're not going to keep moving forward. You're going to go backwards. Yeah.
No matter what you do, there's going to be people as you move forward and do something new. There are going to be people that you know right now that are going to possibly not support you, that might think you're not doing the best for yourself, or they may think it's stupid. They may not understand, right? And if you start to compare and listen, and you might get down on yourself and not move forward, right? So, and what I mean by that is like there's times where we do things and we're like, oh man, we're going to put this out in the public, right? That's not easy to do for some people, right? So keep moving forward. Even when, it's okay to change. It's okay to move forward and do something new. It's okay to create a new, whatever we're like, even what we're doing here. You know what I mean? It's okay to not just go to work. You know what I mean? You can go to work and do something else and move forward. And I think one of the things, like you're saying, is that social media, and there are authentic people on social media. I believe that. But the majority of what's going on is not always presented in a way that is authentic, right? I would say the majority aren't. They're showing the happy moments. They're not showing the in-betweens. You don't see the tears. You don't see the sweat. You don't see the mistakes, right? A lot of times. So anyways, that's my thing on that. But,
and I believe ultimately, in the end, we have to have self-acceptance. Because if we can't accept who we are with our strengths and weaknesses, with our flaws, if we can't accept what our weaknesses are, how are we ever going to get better at those weaknesses?
Right. And if we're constantly comparing ourselves and putting ourselves down and we're in this loop, that doesn't help us, right? We can't we can't stay in that. We just can't.
I think it's important to accept who you are as an individual and accept anything that you're not good at and continue to get better at it.
Right. And I think that brings me back to a little bit about what I had in my notes here, but I wanted to say improve your position, right? So if you can accept it, acknowledge it, you want to improve an example, if it's all right, if I give you an example for myself and then see if you can think of something too that we can give to the listeners, is that you and I, and we've talked a little bit about some of the areas that I've gotten better at is keeping track of things. I was supposed to cold call somebody back again. They said, call me back in a month. I put it on and I followed through 2 days ago. Right. And that would have never happened. I would have been just so disorganized. I would have even knew I was supposed to do that again. Right. So one of my limitations is keeping track of everything, some things. Right. And I've gotten better at that. So I didn't just accept it. I improved my position on that, right? So what did I need to do that? I needed to set up a system to keep track of that, get it into the calendar, the to-do list, and set reminders and attach it to a phone number and all that, right, Brad? So to me, that's improving my position, right? And that goes with what you're saying. Like, you identify where your limitations and your strengths are. Doesn't mean that you don't move past that. You have to try to improve those areas as best you can, right? And I think that's what you're kind of alluding to a little bit with that. At least that's how I feel about this conversation. So
yeah, and find what you're good at, find what your strengths are too, and use that as
develop those skills.
Sort of your force.
Yeah. Yep. So
and then improve at wherever you want to improve.
And understanding where you need to improve is going to take those outcomes and move you closer to accomplishing a goal, right? Because if you're comparing yourself to someone, you're seeing something that you want, right? Is that what happens to you when you compare? Sometimes you're seeing it and you're like, man, I want my video to look like that. I want my artwork to look like, or more polished like that. I want the message to be that impactful.
It's more of a positive outlook.
Right. And so recognize that, understand what skills you have to improve, understand your limitations, try to improve the skills that would be necessary to accomplish something closer to that, right? It might be communication. It might be, being stronger. It might be going to the gym. It might be eating healthier. It might be cooking better. It might, whatever that might be, right? And then you're moving yourself closer to that when you understand your limitations. So for me, it's like I go to the grocery store and I come home and I don't really have a fucking meal. I didn't plan it out, right? So what am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to learn how to plan that out and shop better, right?
You're going to have to give Brad a call and ask him to cook for you.
Right. So, but yeah, I see what you're saying, Brad. Like you have to have that self-acceptance. That's important.
I want to spin it back to business and entrepreneurship too.
Okay. Yeah. And that's
because there's people in the community too. Let's say there's someone in whatever industry you're working in, or there's some real estate moguls that are like, how do I ever get to that level?
Right. And that happened
to it's the same thing.
I shared that story with you earlier today. Like I felt
and that's why I brought that up too.
Oh man.
What you were talking about.
It was terrible. Brad and I went to to look at a place, and the individual has like a ton, just a ton of doors. They own like 80 units or 90, whatever their units are. It's just mind boggling to me because of where we come from. And I remember standing there and I'm like, well, how do you compete with somebody like that? How do you even, and that's that comparing part, and I got to thinking, I shared with you, honestly, that's how I felt, intimidated and didn't know what, and you came back and said, well, you don't, you put me back on track on thinking that, but I've already come to the conclusion is like, their goals are different than our goals. Their starting point is a different starting point than ours. Like, yeah, we can probably learn from them. We can actually connect with them. Maybe there's some residual benefits of that. And they might not even be going after the same level of investments that we're looking at, right? Assets. So I'm like, yeah, that can all switch, but it's intimidating when you meet people in your community that are.
But again, we don't even need to achieve that kind of level of.
No.
Because you and I don't need abundance like you were saying earlier.
Not like that.
Like abundance isn't important to us.
Yeah, it would be. Our overhead is so low that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We have a map that we're starting to work on, and I can see where it wouldn't take 80 units for us to change our lives.
Yeah, so we don't need to be rich.
Right.
And it goes back to what we said previously: is there's different. Everyone's version of success is different.
Right.
And our version of success is we don't have to be wealthy or rich. But as long as all of our needs are taken care of, we're good.
Right. Right. And the map that we have planned out can help us have more time, and we won't be scrambling to make money. Right. That's basically where you and I are at. We want to be more creative, so we want to find ways that we can make this. I don't know if you call it passive because it's not passive income, but it is after you start setting things up. It's more passive than going to work every day. I can tell you that. So those assets will be some semi-passive, right? We'd have our time back. We can do more creative projects. But yeah, I think you brought up a good valid point there. Is like, yeah, comparing and entrepreneurship too. There's always somebody out there doing it better than you.
Oh yeah.
And worse than you probably.
And worse than you. The majority are probably on the same path you are.
Right. Yeah. You don't know unless you sit and talk to them.
So it's really about you being content with where you're at and that you're going to continue developing and getting better
right
at whatever craft it is that you're working on, and not to hold yourself to a high level that somebody that might be more advanced than you. And it doesn't mean that you can't get to that point.
Right.
It just means that they've probably put in the time. They probably started earlier than you, or comparing ourselves to people that are living false realities.
Right. I think those are all valid points that you're making right there. And so, I mean, I think it's a constant battle for humans when they compare.
Because there's a million people that are way more advanced than us.
Well, God, yeah.
And that's fucking great. Like, I want to learn from those people.
I was just going to say, but that's a million opportunities that we have to, like, if we lift our head up, like I was saying this to you a few weeks ago, I was telling somebody, is like, when you step out the door, who's doing it best? Like, when you look outward, that might be your community, that might be your business, it might be something in line with what you want to do. If you want to do a nonprofit, who's doing the best nonprofits? Who's got a good system for doing that? How do they fundraise? Who's doing the best photography in your area? Who's doing the best videography in the area? Who's one of the most influential entrepreneurs in your city? Like, look up, see what they're doing. Who's more eco-friendly than anybody in the area, right? Look up and see who that is. And you'd be surprised if you're working and doing things and, really trying to be a good human, you probably can get in contact with them and they'll teach you something. Usually entrepreneurs are excited about what they're doing. They're willing to share. So if you're looking up, comparing yourself a little bit to see where your skill sets that you want to learn, look up and see who's doing it. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think that's a really valid way of meeting people and learning.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's something that's kind of one of our goals too, is to meet more people that are doing things at a high level.
And it was one of my reasons it's my why for the podcast for me, and to have conversation with you, and we continue to promote our own business and to meet other people. This is my big why, is I want to meet people. And understand why they're doing things and to promote them. We had a client get back to us, and we did have an increase. They had an increase in web traffic when they came on the show, and we don't even have hardly a following yet. But it shows you that if you're doing something on any scale, something has to come out of that, right? So if you feel down on yourself and you're comparing yourself, figure out how to develop the skill, do something to move forward, and things do happen in a good way when you do that. I think get out of your head and actually do something. Don't compare too long to where you paralyze yourself to where you're like, I can't do anything. Like I've been there, done that. We're not trying to live in that space anymore. If somebody else can do it, I don't think I'm going to be a brain surgeon, but if somebody else can do it, I can figure it out.
Yep.
I can figure out real estate. I can figure out doing video work. I can figure out how to color grade. I can figure out how to be a better editor. I can figure out how to be a better photographer. I can figure out how to see an investment down the road, right? So if somebody else can do it, I can learn how to do that. I believe that.
And one of the reasons why I got into business myself, and this is just one small reason, this goes back to several years ago. I was seeing business owners, and a lot of them were who I worked for at the time. And they were just, regular people, but they were highly successful. And so I would look at them and I'm like, well, if they can do it, there's no doubt that I can do it too. And that's not saying anything negative about them. Just saying that
that's
any of you out there, if you put your mind to it, you can achieve any kind of success that you're looking to achieve.
And I don't think you're putting them down. I think that's the healthy part of comparing. Right? So that's recognizing a skill set. Well, I can think along
It's
those
more
lines.
relatable.
Yeah.
And say, well, why couldn't I do this too?
And you were saying business, and it's, sometimes it does come down to money sometimes, right? And I remember people at work wanting $1,000 raise or $2,000 raise or a $4,000 raise, right? Well, the best way you can give yourself a raise is find a way to make your own money. Like nobody's going to give you a raise as good as you can give yourself a raise. If you can develop some skills, you can communicate, you can sell that thing or market it, nobody's going to give you a raise like the money that we make for ourselves. They're just not going to do it in the condensed money making method that I want to think about, right? So you have to decide what your time's worth and your skill and all that, but develop that. And like you said, I think that's a healthy way of comparing, right? You're looking at somebody else. If they can do it, I can do it, right?
Right.
If it's legitimate. And I believe when you looked at those people, you've seen skill sets in them. You're like, well, wait a minute. I can do that. Like I believe in myself enough to be able to do that, right? Good point, man. I like that. And I think that's where we're at. I think that's where we're at as business owners. And I think that's where we're going, is trying to do healthy comparing, connect with people, keep moving forward, develop the skill.
Yep.
If we see a gap, try our best, right, to continue to make that. The other thing is there's a ton of information out there today. You want to learn anything.
You're lucky to be alive.
It's a unique time to be living. Like there's shitty information out there, but there is a lot of credible information out there. And you can sift through that information and learn new skill sets. Entertain yourself also. So it's interesting. It's an interesting time to be alive. I think it's an interesting time because people are using their minds more than their bodies to make money at times. I mean, there's a lot of different ways of making money today. So, and the entry point is lower than what it would have been before for some types of businesses and things like that. So that's interesting. So, great. I think what you brought up tonight as far as, because Brad, you came up with this concept of talking about.
I was in the shower and I was reading through. I'm on a podcast group on Facebook, so I go on there, and there's a lot of great, informative posts that a lot of people have questions of how to do certain things with podcasting, and someone actually made a post that I liked, that it was something that we could really resonate with. And it was about like being authentic to who you are. Yeah,
it just kind of struck you and hit you. And then we talk about that. We talk about not being rough on ourselves and comparing and working on that. And I think I think most people feel that way. I think there's many times in life people are feeling that. And unfortunately, sometimes there's not a good space to talk about that too. I think some people are afraid to admit that they're comparing themselves.
So I was in the shower, and when I'm in the shower, I get a lot of good thought flow in a sense. So I was in the shower and I'm like thinking, what can we do our podcast about? Because we had an idea originally.
Right.
And then what popped into my head was what you always tell me when I get down on myself.
Right.
If I screw up on the podcast.
Right.
Or if I feel like I did.
Right.
Because I'm super hard on myself. And I start comparing myself when it comes to communicating with like Joe or other people that I may know.
Because in your head, you think most people's communication flows smoother than yours.
Yes.
And that's in your head. And I'm not trying to call you out or bash or anything like that. And then that's that compare part. That's why I think that explains why I tell you don't compare yourself.
So it made me think of that. And that's where we came up with what we're talking about today. Because I thought it was something that was important to talk about.
And I want to talk a little bit more about comparing yourself the other way, where you think you're better than people. Not you, but in general.
That's a different kind of negative,
totally different type
pattern.
It is, and it's very limited. And I know many times in my life I've been able to meet people, and you know this about me. I love stories. Everybody's got a story, right? And one of the times I can remember, I can give an example of that, is we met one of the gentlemen that worked on the Mars rover. We're on the Good Time here in Sandusky. We're coming back from a job, and this guy is sitting on there, and he's all disheveled, and his hair is sticking up, and he's got a big belly, and we're crammed at the end. I'm like, I'm just going to talk to this guy, and I don't give a shit what he looks like.
I was with you.
Yeah.
Right? Was that when we saw the lights?
No, it was a different time.
Okay.
There's a whole nother story there, but I don't know if I want to go into it. I think that was the time the girl ended up puking off the side of the boat. She had a G-string on and ended up shitting all over herself.
Oh my goodness.
So I think that was that time, but I don't remember. But anyway, so it was one of the times we were coming back from from Kelly Island.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so, judging people, right? So I got to talk to this guy, and here's this guy that many people I would think might just walk by him. He looks disheveled. He doesn't look approachable. Struck up a conversation. Here, this guy had figured out something on the Mars rover, right? But let's go back to thinking of how you compare yourself. To thinking, I try never to think that I'm better than somebody, because you never know. We have no clue what people go through most of the time.
No.
We know a sliver. We're talking about social media, but even without social media, we do not fully understand what Jane or Joe or Bill has gone through 24 hours before we've seen them, right?
I'm glad you're bringing this up, because this was a part of what I wanted to talk about too.
Okay.
So,
and one of my I had a client for the first time ever complain about a photo recently, and I'll give you an example. She has no clue that the night I went to go shoot that, the night before my brother died. It's the first time I've ever had a complaint for photography, and it was a group shot, and I didn't quite get it right. And rightly so. She's right. I can understand that it's not right, but there's an example of you never know what people are going through, right? And that's my personal story to myself. But the other thing is, you just never know. I think back one time we were in Columbus, Ohio. I was there for a convention, and there was this homeless guy on the street, and my colleagues hadn't quite paid for their bill, so I went out on the street. Well, there's this homeless guy sitting there. I ended up sitting with him and talking to him. Well, while I was sitting there, and I had been with him for almost 20 minutes, the police show up to chase him away. They said they got a phone call on the guy because he was screaming at people. Well, I had been with the guy for 20 minutes. Somebody didn't like that he was out there, so they called the police and they made a false report, right? So I ended up kind of fending off the police a little bit on that one. And I said, well, when did they call? And well, about 10 minutes ago. I said, well, I've been here for 15, 20 minutes with him. He hasn't yelled at anybody. He hasn't asked anybody for anything. And so that's a judgment thing, right? The guy's homeless, so he must be doing something wrong, right? And maybe he has had problems in the before. I don't know him all the time. I know him that 20 minutes. I can only speak for him for that 20 minutes, right? So the judgment part. It can go both ways. You can compare yourself and think you're better than other people. And I think that's just as negative as getting down on yourself, as getting down on another human being. We had some battery issues, so we're back. But my point is that comparing can be even more damaging if you're comparing yourself and thinking you're better than someone. You can make somebody feel uncomfortable. I mean, this doesn't have to, I told a homeless story, but this doesn't have to be a homeless story. This can be somebody you work with. This could be somebody that is in the room and you're kind of stiffing them off because you think you're better than them. That can be just as damaging. And you can miss out on an opportunity of learning about somebody and learning about yourself when you're listening to them. So we're talking about compassion too there, I think, a little bit when you're comparing in that way. So
yeah, we're way more complex individuals than just a first impression.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
So you just don't know what somebody's going through, what they're thinking. You just have no clue.
Right. I think just be careful how you're comparing. Listen to that voice in your head when you're comparing yourself to other people, when you're comparing yourself to on those different levels that we talked about emotionally. Like, really think about that. How is that affecting your self-talk? How is that affecting your self-talk about another human being? And does it benefit you? Are you really are you comparing in a way that's going to help you in the future? Are you comparing in a way that you want to develop a skill? Are you comparing in a way that you're telling yourself that you'll never be able to do that? Are you comparing in a way that doesn't celebrate the other people's skills? You know what I mean? Because you can do that too. That's another way. You start comparing, you get resentful, and you're like, oh, well, that guy doesn't deserve that. Well, maybe he doesn't deserve it. Maybe he's put in the 30,000 hours, maybe he's been working on that for 20 years and you have no clue how much he's worked on that. So I think it's a great subject. I think it's something that we're all growing in. I don't think I've mastered it yet, but I definitely think I'm questioning how I'm thinking about comparing myself as a human being to others.
Same. Yeah, I catch myself a lot quicker now with those thought processes, thought patterns.
Why do you think that is?
Because we're talking about it. You and I talk about it all the time. We're talking about it on the podcast. So it puts it into perspective more.
Right.
And I don't want to continue with those thought patterns. I think we've been working on a lot of personal growth.
Right. That's one of the reasons.
And it's hindered me in the past when I get into those negative thought patterns.
Right.
And it's made me not push myself further ahead.
Right. Yeah, because if we're being negative and we're putting that on us, we might not do. Can I give you an example, if that's all right?
Yeah.
So you think if we're talking about changing our thinking, and I think we really are working on that, like daily, weekly, monthly, right, within the business, because we know that there's an investment there too, right? There's a payback on that. That investment is, I think it compounds when you're being positive. You might talk to somebody then. If you're being negative on yourself, you might not talk to them. So that cuts you off from the world too, I think, a little bit. But one of the things I'm saying to you is, like, we talked about networking this year. If you continually be negative about that and not look for the reason how you're going to develop that skill, what's that do to us? What's that do for the business? What's that do for your personal growth, do you think? Very limited, in my opinion, right? So that's one of the reasons we're working on this separately, collectively, and with the business, and being open about that with people around us, and even on this podcast. I think being open and transparent and being authentic is going to help us grow, not only as business people, but as within our personal growth and within the community. Because I think we should. I don't think we're less than people. I think we should be a part of that, right? And right. To be able to create a space that other people can join and talk about things that like this and other things that will help people. So, yeah, great topic, brother. I'm glad you brought it up this week.
Yeah, so hopefully we're, again, helping you guys learn new things, spark new ideas, help you overcome whatever personal things that you have in your life.
Right.
It could be negative self-talk or negative thought patterns. So that's what our goal for this one was.
Yeah, and keep that in mind. If you have any thoughts about it too, we want responses, right? If you have something that can add to that comparing conversation we just had, please share it. We have an email. You can comment, you can subscribe, you can do those things, and we'd like to open up those conversations. The other thing I want to say is, if you know anybody out there that's doing something really cool in their business, and they're really working, whether that be a nonprofit, whether that be something in the community, or whether it be an entrepreneur, or whether it be somebody in their career that's doing really well, we'd love to sit and have a conversation about how they continually move forward and uplift their own life and the people around them. That, for me, that's more my personal, and I think you feel the same way. But we'd like to meet other people that are doing things in their community. So reach out to us.
Yeah, reach out. Like, go on any of the podcast platforms. Review us, rate us. We have an email address. Our Vision Podcast.
HOUR.
Our Vision Podcast. Or our email is hello@ourvisionpodcast.com. So if you want to reach out via email, you can do that. We have a website, ourvisionpodcast.com. We're on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff.
It's our, HOUR.
Yeah. So there's many platforms to reach out to us on. Pick your poison.
Right. And we're going to continually get better. We're going to move forward. And I know we dove a little bit into that was more of a personal goal that we were talking about tonight. So I don't think you can move on in business without thinking about how you think. Me personally, like that to me goes hand in hand. Your thinking has to change as you grow as an entrepreneur.
Yep.
And that's all we're talking about here today a little bit, is asking people to think about how you compare yourself, right? And get in control of your thoughts a little bit, right?
Right.
And so.
Yeah. So
thank you for
Joe.
Thank you for listening. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
One more thing. No, that's it. That's a wrap. Well, until the next one, we'll see you guys. Peace out.
Peace.